Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Mindsets podcast. I'm still your host, Angus Cook. Welcome back for another episode. Today we're talking to someone slightly different who's got a bit of an interesting journey across a few sports, but also some interesting periods of their life. So I'm going to hand straight over to G to introduce yourself. Do you want to take over?
Yes, I'm G. I'm 25. I'm currently living in Clapham. I've always had quite a sporty upbringing. My parents were always very into sport. So grew up kind of running, playing football, athletics, and now running is predominantly kind of the sport that I'm doing. But yeah.
Cool. So before we do anything else on this podcast, for those that are new, we are going to find out more about G. That's not the podcast complete. What we're going to do though is we're going to jump into our first section, which is the show and tell section. Yes. So what I like to do is I like to invite all of our guests to bring something to talk about that shows off maybe something they've achieved, something they've done, or something that has value to them. So we can learn a little bit more about them and get a bit of an idea of their personality. So G has brought along a wooden box. So yes. Also, I appreciate if you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple or whatever you are, you can go and check this over on the YouTube. So search at Mindsets Podcast or at Mindsets_podcast, and you'll find us there so you can watch this. But otherwise, I'll do my best audio description. So we are looking at a wooden box. What is it?
So this is my favorite item in the world. This is my memory box. It was gifted to me by my boyfriend, and initially it was kind of for us to put all of our different receipts in, memories from favorite dates, that type of thing. But I do use it a bit more generally just to kind of put anything in that I think I want to look back on. I feel like it's really easy to like just live life without looking back and seeing what you've achieved and stuff. So yeah, I like to open this when maybe I'm feeling a bit down and I want to look at kind of what I've done in the past, that type of thing. But yeah, it's missing a few photos. For those listening on Spotify, it's got kind of little holes in it for photos on the outside. So I need to fill it in with maybe my favorite memories. But yeah.
Are there any, I don't want to dive too far into what you're hiding in the box, but are there any specific memories in there that you hold particularly fond or like any good ones?
Yeah, we can have a little peek if you want. Right, okay. So what have we got in here? We have got my first ever garment.
Wow, I've never seen that one before.
I feel like it looks quite retro.
It looks a bit like an Apple Watch, but not.
Yeah. So that's very special to me because I had this when I was growing up. So all of my running, athletics, I would be on the track using this. So I feel like it holds a lot of special memories.
How old were you when you got that?
Oh gosh, I want to say for like my 15th birthday, maybe.
Oh wow.
16th birthday.
It's a 10-year-old.
So yeah, she's doing well. And I actually charged her the other day to see if she still worked, and she does. So
nice.
Yeah, so that's that. What else do we have? We have got open this up, number for the Paris Marathon. Which I did this year, but I feel like we'll go into that maybe a bit later. So that's, yeah, quite special. And then I've basically just got like loads of photos of like special memories. So this is one of my best friends, Poppy, really cute photo. And then honestly, there is so much to unpack in here. Really random stuff as well. Like this, I feel like you'd look at this and be like, what is this?
I'm looking at something that looks a bit like a shower cap with rabbit ears.
It's a bag. It's a little like gift bag. And it was basically given to me when I was at my cousin's house for an Easter dinner. So it was filled with like loads of little chocolates, things like that. And they moved to Canada recently. So it's something that kind of reminds me of them, which I think is really sweet. Really but yeah, lots in here. There's a bucket hat in here, which is a Women's World Cup football bucket hat. So that was given to me in a raffle. I've got a lighter from Berlin, which I just picked up for all my candles because I love my candles in my house. So yeah, there's lots in there.
See, the thing I like about this is, one, this is a show and tell, and you've hacked the system. You've brought in loads of things to show and tell, which is really good. I like that.
Yeah.
And two, again, for people that might just be listening to this, you might be thinking this is like a shoebox. It's not, it's tiny. The fact that you've fitted all of this stuff in there already, you're going to need to upgrade the box.
You wouldn't think there would be a bucket hat in here, would you?
I don't, but you said it and I was like, yeah, there's not.
It's hidden away in
really
there.
well folded.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So that gives us a bit of an insight into some of the things we're going to be talking about today.
Yes.
But what I like to do is I like to go back to from the earlier days? Because what I feel like especially when it comes to doing a bit of a podcast, talking to people that are active about sport and mental health, not many people when they were very young knew what mental health meant, let alone physical health a lot of the time.
Yeah.
But you sort of find sport for fun, you do sport with friends, that kind of thing. Where did sport really start for you?
So my parents are both really sporty. So my mum's kind of, I think she was about 30, maybe a bit older, she started marathon running. So I was always kind of going to her races, watching her do all these amazing events. And my dad was always very sporty since he was younger. He was into football and his main sport was cricket as well. So he would kind of take me to all these cricket matches. And I think I just loved watching sport. And then I thought, hang on a sec, I want to be involved in this. So I think I was about 12 and I went to my local athletics track and just started running and then made kind of really good friends there. And I feel like every week, so I went to school with these friends as well. Every week it would just be more of a social thing, like, oh, are you going to training tonight? Be training kind of 3 or 4 times a week at this club. And then off the back of that came all the kind of competitive running. So yeah, got really into cross country when I was younger, which was really good. But yeah, I think it stems from my parents being sporty and kind of just showing me the value of sport as well through watching it with them.
Interesting thing about your parents, you've mentioned that your mum is a bit of a hero to you and she's got quite an interesting story herself. Do you want to touch on that?
Yeah, so my mum was actually adopted when she was, I think, 6, maybe 8 weeks old. But she's my absolute hero because everything she does is kind of powered by her story in adoption. And she's actually now working in adoption. So she works on adoption panels, helping people to adopt kids, which I think is amazing. And yeah, she's just a very special woman.
And I was going to say, she's got you into a sort of, well, if we look at where you are now, you've done some rather long runs.
Yeah.
And she's clearly been a bit of a kind of an idol for that as well, I suppose.
Yeah.
Talking about your running.
Yes.
I did some digging.
Oh, God.
And I could find some running times and that sort of thing online, which takes me back to 2013 when you got involved. Well, it would have been school and that sort of thing, but you've gone through to St Albans Striders.
Yeah.
That team. But we mentioned it beforehand. Your 5K personal best time you set when you were 12.
Yeah, which is really annoying because recently I've been trying to get close to the 21 minutes that I set and I haven't come anywhere near. And I'm like, what did my parents feed me at 12 years old to make me power through a park run in 21 minutes?
Well, this is another thing. You were doing a park run, and a park run is like a public event.
Yeah.
So you've got grown men that are running around.
Yeah.
And at 12 years old, you can't be particularly tall or anything like that. So you're just running along with these people. What's that environment like at that age? Especially because you're going to be beating quite a few adults.
Yeah.
Like that.
I actually think, I was thinking the other day, why was I 12 and running that quickly? And I think, obviously there's a lot to do with hormones when you grow up and it changes your body and all of that type of thing. But I actually think just not having any life pressure at that age, I was able to just do this park run as quickly as I wanted to do it and have a really good time running against like grown men. I'd love to see that footage. I'd pay a lot of money to see me as like a little beanpole running against some like grown men. But yeah.
I think one of the things that I find particularly inspiring about you in terms of who you are and your sport is that you've gone against the grain a little bit in that way where you're taking some satisfaction in being faster than older men. You've also, you've done sport, which I think is growing now massively in the women's space, but women's football, especially when I was sort of around the same age, wasn't really a thing. I didn't think I know anyone that really played women's football.
Yeah.
I want to preface this with G's really good at football. Like,
oh my God, dude.
I played football when I was younger. I did stop playing, but I like to think of myself as I could step out on a pitch tomorrow and be good. I genuinely know most of my friends would probably pick you over me. In terms of
no,
ability.
that's just not true.
When it comes to the position in football,
yes,
I want to know when you started playing football for one,
okay.
but then what your kind of progression was with the sport in terms of position and how you played it, why you played it.
Yeah, so it's a weird one. I always grew up doing athletics And I feel like I didn't have time to really pursue football when I was younger. But I really enjoyed playing it because I'd basically play with my mum's best friend's son just in the garden for hours on end. And he almost was like my personal trainer and would just teach me everything to do with football. So I learned so much through him, but I never actually played competitively until I got to uni, because I got to uni and thought athletics is quite like a convoluted space. Like I feel like it would just be so hard to race for Loughborough, especially being a really good sporting uni, and be really good at athletics, whereas football, women's football especially, even back then wasn't like huge. So I played at uni and really enjoyed it. And yeah, the sport is just growing so quickly now. Like it's mental to even think in the past couple of years how far it's come. Even with the Women's World Cup, it got so much coverage. You look at like Arsenal ladies, they're selling out the Emirates now. Like it's absolutely huge. But yeah, I absolutely love it.
So are you more of a goal scorer, or are you?
So position wise, I like to be on a wing because I like to use the running basically. Yeah. But yeah, I do like glory hunting, to be honest. I do love scoring a goal.
I was going to say, what is your niche? Because we've had a few people that have come onto the podcast recently that have got a bit of a background in football. They have been very, very admittedly extremely aggressive, so have found themselves more towards the defence side of things. Are you definitely just sort of goal-minded?
I think so, yeah. I like to like, oh my God, I'm going to sound like such a show-off, but I like to like be quite techie and like
cut in
and do all of that jazz. And I do just love that feeling of scoring a goal. I live for that feeling.
So I actually thought that was the case.
Okay.
So one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, what's the best goal you scored? Can you describe it for us?
Yes, and I've actually got footage of it, so you can insert a little clip here.
Don't worry, everyone. Come check it out. I'll paste it in it.
It was just like, it was quite far out, and I just kind of cut around a player, and I think it was top bins, but the clip will show us. I can't quite remember it. I always forget the goals that I score. I feel like I'm so in the moment, and then after I look back and I'm like, I can't even remember what that goal was like. So
I had a discussion recently with someone that sadly, the best goal I ever scored when I played football was in my first ever game.
Really?
And it was unbelievable. No one would have ever believed me if my friends hadn't been there on the day.
Yeah.
But yeah, my career just went downhill from there.
Gosh.
Now, obviously athletics had been a big thing, and as we said there, football's been an interesting part of your life, which you were still playing quite recently, weren't you?
Yes, so I still play for a team. Basically, when I started marathon training, I stopped for a while because I felt like I was coming back from every training session, every game with injuries. And I've kind of been a bit scared to go back because I feel like I've caught this running bug now. But yeah, I do still play for South London Women, so yeah.
Now, tying in with marathon running, I think one of the things that you're probably a little bit wary of is getting injured from football ruins all your preparation or any chance of running, really. Now, running-wise, you started to increase the distance of your runs. Your runs, when I was looking at St Albans Striders, were more around cross-country running, but there was also some sort of 400-metre runs in there as well. Now that you've gone a bit more long distance, what sort of provoked the want to do marathons and half marathons and that sort of thing?
So I think, as I mentioned earlier, obviously my mum, like watching her kind of achieve all these things with marathon running, and she would always tell me it was the best thing in the world. So yeah, I had to kind of do it to believe her. I think also with marathon running, it's more of a long-term thing. So you train for like 4 or 5 months, and I loved having that structure. Whereas with a race, you obviously have like a season of athletics, but I don't think I cared as much about it as I did with trying to achieve a goal, like an end goal. It was more like every race you go out and you race, okay, fine. I wasn't really going for PBs. I wasn't really fussed about how fast I was going, that type of thing. But with marathon running, it's so everything comes down to that one day where you run, and it's such a big build up. And it's really fun just having the structure of like, okay, all my friends are going out and getting drunk this weekend, but actually I'm going to wake up sober, feeling great, and I'm going to go on a 20k run, and I'm going to feel better than they do. So it was that type of thing for me where I just loved having that kind of, structure, I guess.
what I find really interesting is I've kind of been on both sides of that. Like, I've never been a huge person for nights out, but I do recall there would be times, especially at Loughborough, where people are doing a lot of training and that sort of thing, but even post uni and everything, where I've gone out or I've been busy at the weekend and I wake up and I see, I didn't have Strava at the time, but I'd wake up and see like Instagram stories of people's Strava being like, oh, I've just done a 20K. And I'd be like, in what world would you want to do that? Like, these people are saying they're having a better time. And then now I'm on the flip side of it, where I'm way more active, and I can fully confirm that I get more out of life by doing that sort of thing, because you're not just bettering yourself because you have done a run, but like the sort of mental process that you go through when you're doing long runs, and then also not putting all that shit in your body the night before. It does make a massive sort of difference to who you are as well as how you feel. And it's been quite nice to see you sharing some of that journey as well online. But there's been some rough stuff that's happened in the last few years, which has kind of tied into your running journey, I feel like, a little bit. It started towards the back end. Well, it kind of happened at the back end of university, didn't it, really? Do you want to take us through what happened?
So I think the first marathon, so I've only done 2 marathons. I've done London in 2022 and then Paris this year. And for London, the whole kind of reason why I wanted to do a big thing was because I really sadly lost a friend at uni to suicide. So Miles was in our friendship group. I lived with him. Angus knew him very well as well at uni. And he was just so loved by everyone. He was so lighthearted. And then no one really knows how it went so wrong, but he just kind of went very downhill, very quiet, kept himself to himself. And I think it's really hard with losing a friend, and I don't think it's spoken enough about the guilt that you feel after. And I feel like I really struggled with that. And instead of kind of just sitting around and doing nothing, I channeled that into, I'm going to do something amazing for him. I raised money for the London Marathon, for the Mental Health Foundation. Managed to raise, I think it was near like £3,000, which is amazing. It powered me through that marathon training and through the marathon. At the marathon itself, his mum was there, which was like really hard, but also amazing. And she was just so grateful for me running. And I also ran it with my friend Steph, who also raised money for Miles. And it was a really hard time at uni, but I think to be able to turn it into something positive and raise money through mental health initiatives and charities is something amazing that you can do with something so sad.
I think what you've done is incredible. And I do want to pick up on, you mentioned the guilt there. Is the guilt more from the side of you always feel like you could have done something, but then you couldn't?
I think that's exactly it. So I've got like birthday cards, Christmas cards from Miles that I've kept that say things like, thank you so much for being here, being there for me this year. You've helped more than you could ever imagine. And that should be enough to read that card to think, I did everything I could. But there is still something inside of you, like a little voice that you shouldn't listen to, but you do, that says you could have done more. Why didn't you do more? And speaking to people in our friendship group, I know I'm not the only one that felt like that. But that's where things like counselling come in, and people can do like amazing things to try and help. But yeah. So
did you lean on your sort of friendship network, or did you get some counselling and see someone as well?
I actually didn't get counselling. I've never had counselling before. It's not something that I wouldn't be open to. I just think at the time I had such an amazing support network. Our group at uni was super close, and I found out on a certain day, that whole day everyone travelled to London, we all met up. And we just sat in my friend's kitchen and just all spoke about him. And it was like amazing that we could all just do that straight away, and we all had each other. So I felt like that was enough for me personally. But yeah,
it's sadly it's become a thing that I think has become reality for people, especially at our age. I think back to when I was like in my early teens, and even like when I was in my quite young, I knew that suicide was a thing that existed. I didn't really understand it to the same degree that I would now, but it is becoming more and more prevalent, especially in tough economic times.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of pressures that we experience, and to a degree, because every generation is different, you're not really well equipped for some of the things that happen in your life. I think my outlook and the way I process the term suicide, or taking of one's own life, is massively different as a result. But one of the questions I wanted to ask you was, how has having a friend take their own life changed your perspective on both life and death at a young age, and also for you, the term suicide?
So when I went to Miles's funeral, his sister said something that has actually stuck with me ever since. And I was speaking to his mum about this not long ago. His sister basically said, when she was kind of giving her speech at the funeral, next time you need to take a big step in life, think of Miles. And it was something along those lines. And it was so powerful that every time I go into something where I'm nervous, I'm anxious, I have imposter syndrome, I will just think of Miles and I'll think, he's watching me. He wants me to do well. I'm going to do it. So even to do this podcast today, it's like probably crazily out of my comfort zone, but I thought Miles would love this. Like, he would love watching me on here. So I'm going to go and do it. Things at work, if I've got a big presentation, like, I'll just think, you've got it. Miles is watching, you've got it. And yeah, it definitely powered me through the marathon. When it got tough at mile 22, I basically had like so much lactic in my legs that my quads completely went, and I felt like I was just like running underwater essentially. But again, that mindset of Miles is watching, like, you've got to do it for him. It has powered so much positivity in my life now that way back when I found out about Miles, I would have never thought that would have been the case. Yeah.
I think that's quite a powerful tool. And I think you are right. Miles not only would back the fact that you've made it onto the podcast, but doing all the things that you've done is really impressive. I think anyone that knows Miles that's listening to this as well will appreciate what difference that's made for you.
Yeah.
I think one question I do have that is a bit of an interesting one based on that situation is, when it comes to your own mental health, how do you process things when things aren't so good on your own end, now that you have seen in quite a close network kind of the disastrous effect that it can have on someone?
Oh, that's a good question. For me, I do rely on sport very heavily. For maybe not so extreme, but if I'm having a bit of a down day, my boyfriend will say to me, have you been out today? Have you been on a long walk today? Have you been for a run recently? Because he knows that that can be like the trigger that just completely flips my mood. And I just think that is so powerful. And for people that maybe aren't into sport, I don't do sport to look good or to like, yeah, there's an element of like looking after your body, but I do it completely for the mental aspect. Because I just think there is nothing that compares to going on a jog. It doesn't even have to be quick. Like, you can go so slow, going on a walk and just getting some fresh air, being at one with nature, no AirPods, no cap. So you've got some vitamin D, you've got the sun shining on your face. I will come back from that and feel like a new person. And I feel like in terms of mental health, that is the biggest thing that I could ever rely on.
I can safely say that I have never regretted going out and doing some form of exercise, which is wild because some of the conditions that I have gone out in would lead you to believe that when I come back, I'm actually really like upset because I'm drenched, I'm cold, everything like that. But while that might be the case, I'm actually still better off than I was. And I find it with like daily stress, or even the most ridiculous thing recently. I was trying to post something for the podcast actually.
Okay.
And Instagram's just, okay, if anyone from Instagram's listening to this, you didn't hear this, Instagram is one of the most annoying apps ever. Because it just wouldn't post correctly. And I was such an irritable person. And I hadn't gone out that day. I hadn't done anything. It got to the point where I literally threw my phone at the sofa. So I was smart. But I threw my phone in annoyance. And I was like, what are you doing? That's so like icky. And so then I went and got my phone. And I was like, look, we're going to the gym. Went to the gym, came back. And everything after that was fine. And I've always found that with work as well. Like, I would always go to the gym or do some sort of activity before work so that any stress I have, I'm not taking into the work day. Because by the time I've done some activity, that's melted away. And it also gives you a bit of, to a degree, I've said this before, but a bit of invincibility. If you've pushed yourself really hard, then when something else happens to you that pushes some of those buttons, you've already pushed them for the day. And so they kind of affect you less. And I've had it where I've gone for like a squat PB or something, and I have collapsed in the morning, and then something really bad happens at work, and I'm like, could be worse. I'm not stuck under a bar that's too heavy for me to do, or I'm not I'm like trying to hold my lungs still in my body from a really, really hard run. So that's an experience that I think I've shared. And I think it's really cool that you have identified that sport is that for you, because it's very difficult for some people to find what that is. And I do think that for a lot of people, it can be activity. But to really know that it is that for you, and getting a run, as simple as getting a run as well, or getting out and having a walk, is so easy to do. Now, there is actually something else that you mentioned that's worth talking about here. And I don't want it to be all like a downward thing, because I think there's such a positive story here. You've had to make some adjustments to actually boost your performance recently. We spoke to someone a couple of episodes back, Cairo, who was taking testosterone. Now, you're not doing the same sort of thing, but you have had, you've noticed that, well, you got some blood work done, and you noticed that you needed to supplement something.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about this? Because this is something that I have actually experienced in my close family, but I can't weigh on directly.
Yeah. So this is quite interesting, because I feel like if I were listening to this a few years ago, I would have had no idea what your thyroid was or how important it was. So I was basically stood on a train platform probably around 3 years ago now, and essentially I nearly collapsed, which is crazy. I felt fine, but I had to get some help onto the train, and then I got home, got picked up by my parents and explained it to them, and they basically said, go for blood tests. And the blood test came back, and I had hypothyroidism, which is basically an imbalance of your hormones. And I think it's just crazy how instrumental your hormones are to your body, and I don't think people talk about it enough. My sister is also huge on all of this kind of female hormone health stuff, so I've learned a lot from her. But I was given some supplements, and I basically also cut out any kind of triggers to me that I thought weren't helping with the side effects of being really tired all the time, having anxiety, all of that type of thing. So I completely cut out caffeine, and I haven't had it since. And that to me was like a huge benefit. Like, if you're feeling a bit anxious, I just think don't have a coffee. Like, it's obviously going to heighten it. But yeah, that was quite a scary time. But as soon as I was on the medication, I felt a lot better. But yeah, I just think in terms of female hormone health, especially, we need to take care of ourselves. And I think if you maybe haven't been feeling right, there's no harm in going for blood tests and just seeing kind of where you're at with everything.
It's worth mentioning from my side as well, us guys have the hormone life relatively easy because of our cycle being like 24 hours. So it can be quite quick for us to notice when something is wrong in that sense. The other thing is that we're not pumping different hormones into our bodies from quite a young age. If you think about, quite a lot of women, especially when they're young, go straight on the pill. Yeah. And that's just not you controlling your hormones anymore. No. And it makes a dramatic difference, and it can have a huge difference later on. And to a degree, when you're that young, you don't really know what impact it's going to have to you. And of course, they're all tested drugs, but everyone reacts differently to everything. Yeah. And so you could have these sort of impacts. So if you are ever feeling, not necessarily just lightheaded, but feeling like things are a little bit off, and you can find a way to get some sort of blood work done, whether you are a guy or a girl, I would highly recommend doing it, because you never know what that could reveal.
Definitely. I had a moment in sixth form, I think it was, where I was sitting in lessons and I was like physically falling asleep, and I was thinking, this isn't a boring lesson, like I shouldn't be kind of feeling as bad as I'm feeling. So that was another time where I was like, okay, I'm going to go for some bloods. And basically with your iron levels, they're supposed to be between two certain numbers. I can't quite remember what they are. I think it's like 12 and 200 and something. Mine were at 4. So I was like so iron deficient, on top of kind of just being a growing woman, like trying to balance all these hormones in my body, which at a later date, obviously it came out that they were so imbalanced anyway. So I just think, yeah, go for your blood tests, find out what's wrong.
Another thing that's I didn't know is that when it comes to iron supplementation, I do feel like most people should probably be having it, because unless you're eating a large amount of beef, you're probably actually not getting enough iron in your diet. Typically, you can get it from certain vegetables like spinach. You need to eat a lot of it.
Yeah.
But for any women that are listening to this, you might not be aware that you actually need more iron than men.
Yeah.
And so if you're thinking, oh, well, I don't need to worry about it too much, I've been okay. If you know any men and you're thinking about how much iron they get, you need to be having more than that.
Yeah.
And guys eat a lot more typically than women do. So especially when you look at the average daily sort of necessity of calories, you've got men at 2,500 calories and women supposedly at 2,000 as well. And I think those are all moving around at the moment. Government's going to change those soon. But in terms of iron, it's the flip.
Yeah.
So iron supplementation, it's not expensive if you can find some
Oh my
online.
gosh, it's like you can get it from Holland and Barrett for a couple of pounds. Like you can get like 50, 100 tablets.
And
like,
it can make a dramatic difference. It can stop you falling asleep and feeling tired. And I've had it in the past with my own training. I felt incredibly lightheaded after I did anything that was like an RDL or a deadlift or a squat. And I was like, oh, it's just what happens. And it's not.
It's not.
But you shouldn't be feeling like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, take blood work seriously and take your supplementation seriously. And if you are feeling a bit off, there is probably a reason for it. It's not just you.
Yeah.
Cool. Now, in terms of giving other people advice, some people have come in with listener questions.
Okay.
So we're on to the listener question section. So if you're listening to this podcast for the first time or you're not aware, I like to put out some information about every guest that comes on just before we start recording, and gives you guys listening at home to have an opportunity to ask direct questions and maybe get some support, some advice, or just ask interesting questions.
Okay.
Now, we have 3 questions today. The first question is actually come from Cairo, who was on the podcast previously.
Yep.
And his question is, what other things have you done to cope with the loss of friends? Now, the reason I say friends here as well is relatively recently we became aware of someone else that we went to university with that has also taken their own life, which is incredibly sad, especially that there is quite a crossover with Miles that we've already discussed. So other than diving headfirst into sport, what other things have you done to sort of cope with the loss of friends?
I think support network is just everything. I relied so heavily on my friends, and I feel like you can feel like a burden at first when you're speaking about something so kind of dark, but if you put yourself in your friend's shoes, they want to help you and they want to listen to you. So I think relying on friends was absolutely crucial to me. And I think just setting myself mini milestones, just to like basically keep my achievements going, to remind myself that I am good at certain things and I can do whatever I want to do. Because it's very easy when you lose someone to kind of lose sight of what you want to do and who you want to be at the same time. So yeah.
Okay. The next question I've got is from Steph.
Oh gosh. Okay.
Steph wants to know,
Yeah.
this one's a bit more on a light note, by the way.
Okay.
What do you look for in a run buddy?
Because she is my run buddy. Is this what she's... Okay.
I assume so.
Right, Steph. What do I look for? Someone that can talk to me for the whole entirety of the run. Because when I'm in a headspace of, God, this is getting a bit hard now, I need someone to be like, hey, you've got it. Someone that will come on stupidly long distance runs with me on a weekend because they're not hungover and that's what they prefer to do. Someone that's ginger probably helps. I recently ran 25k for my 25th birthday. So someone that's nuts enough to come and do that with me. Steph ran the whole thing with me. So yeah, kudos to her. Trying to think what else. I feel like that's a pretty good roundup of Steph and also what I would look for.
I was gonna say, I think the person that I personally would also look for is someone that, yeah, can converse, but more so is just someone that's just willing to do it.
Yeah.
Because I think not everyone wants to go for a run, especially not at the same time. Number of times where people have been like, do you want to go for a run? And I'm just not in the mood. And someone that can turn around and be like, yeah.
You want a yes man.
That's it.
Yeah.
I think that's what I look for.
Agreed.
Okay, so the last question. Steph did actually have another question, but you kind of have already answered it earlier on. So I'm gonna move past that one. The final question that I have got is from Kira.
Okay.
Kira wants to know, what is the most essential piece of running gear that you have?
Oh, that's a good question. Okay. Do I have to give one?
You could tell you what, you can give more than one, but you need to rank them.
Right. Okay. So, number one for me, I think, is my Shocks headphones.
Okay. Not sponsored. Carry on.
I wish. If you want to sponsor us, sponsor us. So when I'm going out on a run, if it's solo without my best running buddy, I need something to keep me going a lot of the time. So I listen to podcasts. So it might be the Mindsets podcast.
At Mindsets_podcast.
A lot of the time it's other podcasts. I just find someone talking to me is really motivational. So I would have to rank my Shocks headphones number one. Number two is a running vest, especially for longer runs. Like, you've got to have something to store everything in. And I like to take so many gels and so much fuel to keep me going. So yeah, that would be number two. Number three, some carbon plated shoes, which we were speaking about earlier. But they are the best thing in the world, because I was saying to Angus earlier, I feel like it's more of a placebo thing. So carbon plated shoes essentially make you run faster. So I wore them for my Paris marathon. I was going for a certain time, didn't quite make that time, but I felt good for the run. I felt springier, I felt lighter on my feet. So they're number three, and I feel like that's a race kit in itself.
I agree with all of them. I actually agree with the order, but I am going to be the sensible person in the room and say, don't buy carbons if you're just going to go out and run every once in a while, because they're actually bad for you.
Yeah, it's for racing.
It's for racing only, or like sim work as well. If you're going to simulate a race, then do that.
Yeah.
But definitely don't just run in them all the time, because they're not comfortable for your feet and they can actually cause you injury. So find a good pair of running shoes that you can train in normally. And then when you want to put the zoomies on, you can fly. Amazing. So that takes us to the end of the listener questions.
Okay.
So now this is the point in the podcast where you get to give yourself 3 pieces of advice when you were younger. So effectively remove me from this chair and this room.
Okay.
And instead, you're going to replace me with, it could be one version of yourself that you want to give 3 pieces of advice to. It could be 3 different versions of yourself that you want to give 1 piece of advice to each of them. What piece of advice would you give to a younger version of yourself?
So 3 pieces. First piece is try and forget about imposter syndrome. You are good at what you do. Don't let society force you into thinking that you are not good enough to do something, because I get that all the time when I'm at work. I've just started a new job. I've come into it, been thrown into the deep end, which I love because I love being busy. But there's a voice that's like, oh, I don't think you're cut out for this. Like, this is maybe a step too far. Just try not to listen. And even now, I'm obviously struggling with that. But I think also in school, it was quite a big thing to try and fit in with everyone else. And yeah, I think that's probably second piece of advice. There's no, like, don't conform, just do your own thing. Find out what it is that you like and stick to it. I don't like to go out and drink masses all the time. I love a drink, but I don't like to do it constantly. And that's okay. Like, the majority of people our age are probably on the flip side and enjoy it way more than I do, but that's fine. And I can live with that, and I'm doing what I want to do. Third piece of advice would be find friends that are your people, because I feel like, as I said earlier, your support network is everything. And if you're friends with people that maybe you don't feel like are your people and they don't bring value to your life, you should be cutting them off, as hard as that is. You shouldn't be people pleasing. You need to have a circle of friends, however big or small that might be, that you really value and you want to spend time with, because life is so short that you shouldn't be spending time with people that you don't want to see. So that's my 3.
Solid pieces of advice. I hope everyone else that's listening to this can take something from that as well. We do have one more question.
Okay.
So the final part is where we have a question from the previous guest, which will inevitably mean you need to ask a question for the next guest. Mm-hmm. Now, last week we had George on. George, as a bit of a summary, he has a huge athletic background, started playing football, ended up getting into rugby, went pro in rugby, had a ridiculous number of injuries. Not quite the story where it's like I would have gone pro if. He broke his back in 2 places and still went pro.
Gosh. Yeah.
Then had more injuries. Then COVID came along. Didn't work out. He's now turned towards high rocks, a bit like myself. Seems to be where every failed athlete is going. But he's asked you a bit of an interview style question.
Oh, okay.
Where do you want to be in 10 years and why?
That is an interview style question. I'm kind of not going to answer this, but I am.
That is a great way to start the question.
So I actually I kind of love the beauty of not knowing. And I actually think 10 years is too big of a milestone to think about. I have no idea where I'm going to be in 10 years' time, but I don't think I should let that panic me. I think that's actually okay. I want to be with someone that makes me happy. I want to be comfortable financially. I want to have maybe 3 dogs. I don't know where I want to be, but that's okay. And I feel like I can't answer this question like with a definitive, this is where I'm going to be at this time. But I think also there is so much pressure when you're mid-20s to know that. And I think what I'm trying to get at is not knowing is also perfectly fine.
You can steal this if you like. I heard a quote a few months ago that has stuck with me more than I thought it would.
Yeah.
Which is similar to that, where 10 years is a long time. If I think back to what I was doing 10 years ago, I was doing my A-levels or like trying to figure out what I was doing. I thought I knew what I was doing with my life, had no idea. Ended up panicking, going off and skiing for a year. Mm-hmm. But the biggest thing is that in 10 years' time, I want that person to be proud of me.
Yeah.
And I think that's all I ever care about. And when it comes to that 10 years, if I can look back and be proud of who I was today, all I want for the next 10 years is that 10 years is proud of me.
Yeah.
Because I think that's all you can really ask for. People come and go in life, in some ways nicer than others. But you are always with yourself. Mm. And so you're the person that really has to take care of yourself and see where you are in future.
Definitely.
And I agree. I think setting shorter milestones is better. Milestones. Which I really like.
I like that it's catching on.
That was smart. But yeah, I think overall, I want to take life as it comes, but with the general theme of I will always be able to look back and be like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. Having absolutely no idea is probably not ideal. But I just think having every single thing mapped out, it's not going to work out anyway. So there's no point saying in 10 years' time, I'm going to be doing this. I don't really know if I believe in manifestation either. I'm a bit on the fence about it, but yeah.
I think it's got its place in terms of manifestation's become a bit of a term I feel abused by TikTok in terms of so. if you think something, if you dream something, you can achieve it. I actually do kind of agree with that, but you don't need to spend hours and hours with your legs crossed and your hands in like a crap shape to make something happen.
Yeah.
But you've just got to have big dreams and you've got to do the work to get there. And if you do that, then yes, you can say you've manifested it. I would argue you did it.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the value is in me saying that, but if someone took any motivation from that, then there you go, just go do it. Now that brings us to the point where we have to ask a question for the next guest.
Oh my goodness.
What would you like to ask the next guest, having no idea anything about them? It can be
really hard.
As deep or as silly as you like.
Oh, okay, that helps.
Yeah.
That really helps. What is the most embarrassing thing that's ever happened to you whilst engaging in a form of sport?
Okay, I like that because I hope we get a bit of an admittance of something that they probably wouldn't have mentioned in the podcast.
Yeah.
Amazing. So that kind of ties up with questionings. You're off the hook now. You don't have to answer anything else. Kind of.
Oh gosh.
You've got a bit of a background in football. I don't know if you're aware at the moment, but there's the Euros going on.
I am aware, yes.
Sadly, and at the time of recording of this podcast, England have only played 2 games. I've not personally been particularly impressed, but that's just who the English public are. We're never going to be impressed until we win.
Yeah.
First question. Is it coming home?
I would love to say yes to you, but from what I've seen so far, I'm just not sure. I will say it's coming home. It is coming home. It's coming home. But
I'm going to give a conflicted answer. Yes, it's coming home. I don't know where home is anymore.
That's so good.
And my last question is, you are doing some work. I don't really want to bring work too much into it, but you're doing some work with the Olympics at the moment.
Yeah.
From your side, where should everyone keep their eyes peeled for good Olympic performances?
Oh, I think athletics, because there's various stories at the moment where there has been just some incredible broken records, PBs of people that are so young and up and coming. And I just think athletics is also just so exciting to watch. I'd also say keep your eyes peeled for the new sports. So urban sports like breakdancing, quite cool. Give that a watch. And yeah, skateboarding looks really fun. So yeah, I think those
cool. Thank you. I'll add those to the highlight list. So that brings us to the end of this episode. G, you've been fantastic. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
What I want to know is there could be people listening to this that might want to reach out to you, or they might just want to follow along and support in your next thing that you go and achieve.
Yes.
So where can they find you?
So you can find me on Instagram. I'm going to do a shameless kind of...
Please shamelessly plug away.
Yeah, okay. So I've got a running account, which is at g.ontherun. And I've also got a personal account at Georgia_Robin. So if anyone wants to reach out and talk about anything, just give me a shout.
Fantastic. And for those listening to the Mindsets podcast and you decided this might not be the worst place to come and listen to some more exciting episodes, we've spoken to lots of people from lots of different backgrounds. So you can talk to people that, as I've mentioned already, we've had people that have dabbled in the use of performance enhancing drugs. We've had people that have broken world records. We have Olympians. We have an absolute plethora of athletes and interesting stories for you to listen to while you're working out, while you're running, while you're at work, pretending that you're doing work. So if any of those sound like a good time to listen to the podcast, go back and check it out. We are at Mindsets_podcast on everything. And you can find all of the links to listen to the podcast in the bio there. So I hope to see you over there. Drop a follow, drop a share if you can, and do the same with G as well. So I want to say thank you all for listening, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.